Welcome back, it's Lincoln. Today I'm excited because, as promised, I'm discussing existentialism. Existentialism is the philosophy of practice I adopted in my performance psychology master's program. Now what this means is it is the psychological foundation for the way that I work with my clients. Existentialism as a whole can be broken down into two key components that are like an umbrella for the entire philosophy. So those are balancing tragedy and opportunity, and then understanding that life is in constant transition and that as individuals we must evolve with that transition. So what does balancing tragedy and opportunity mean? Well, you cannot have one without the other. Within tragedy, let's say as in last year, there's so many people with loss of job. With a loss of job, with that tragedy, now there's an opportunity. There's more time available to create something on their own or to find a job that maybe better fits them. Or now they have the opportunity to spend more time with family. Another example is breakups. Breakups is something that most of us experience, and most of us experience more than once. So there's the tragedy within the heartbreak, but then there's the opportunity to not only learn and grow from the experiences, there's the opportunity to move on with life and maybe take on new opportunities that would have never presented themselves had you stayed in that relationship. Now, on the most extreme level, I would say there is the tragedy of death and then the opportunity for new life. So a perfect example of this, about 4 years ago, one of my closest friends, Josh Hohulin, died in a car accident. I'll never forget standing at his funeral. We're outside, the snow's swirling, the wind is chilling to the bones, and his sister Rachel, she's 9 months pregnant, and I remember looking at her in the front, and she's just sobbing. And then less than a week later, she gives birth to a beautiful baby boy. It would have been amazing to see the pure joy on her face as she held her beautiful baby boy. Now, where there was the tragedy of death a week prior, there's now this new opportunity for life sitting in her hands. So the balance is taking the emotional extremes from both ends and understanding that life is lived kind of in the middle for the most part. We're not always in this emotional state of tragedy, but we're not also always in this emotional state of like bliss or joy. Life is lived in that middle. So the balance is finding how do we take what we've learned from tragedy and opportunity, and then how do we, as this transition happens in life, evolve and learn from the experiences that we've just taken from these extreme sides of emotion, and how do we integrate that, and how do we produce a life that is growing and evolving and continually taking steps forward. So that is a very basic, very basic generalization of the overarching view of existentialism. Now, underneath this umbrella, it comes down to 6 different aspects of life. So we have the capacity for self-awareness. We have freedom and how it's related to responsibility. We have individuation. How do we become an individual but also maintain healthy relationships? The search for meaning, a very broad topic, and purpose and meaning is discussed a lot, but we'll still go into a little bit of the detail of that. Anxiety and how that is a condition in life. It's always viewed as this terrible thing, but there's actually benefits that we can recognize from anxiety. And then death and non-being. Maybe one of the most challenging ones to take on is that death is a reality for all of us. So the capacity for self-awareness. What does that mean? Now for me, I'm going to take that as this is where you recognize that the actions you take have an impact on people around you. So when I got out of the military, I went through this 5-year exploration phase where I was taking steroids. I was utilizing party drugs like Molly. I had a cocaine addiction for a year and a half. There was this period of time to where I was doing harmful things to myself, but in the moment, I believed that it only affected me. I was like, it doesn't really matter what I do because the impact rests on my shoulders only. But what I started to notice is that as these are aspects of my life, they become conversations that I have with people. I think that they're kind of cool, so I'm talking to friends and be like, hey, maybe you should try this. And what I notice is that the actions that I have taken are now negatively impacting the circle of friends that I have and circle of acquaintances and people that I have some type of influence on. So this is where we move on to the second step, freedom and responsibility. So now I have a choice. With what I understand, am I going to take responsibility for the damage that I have caused? And with this responsibility also comes freedom. So this is where the idea that freedom isn't free really shows. Because to have that true freedom, you have to first take on the burden of responsibility. In Jordan Peterson's book, Maps of Meaning, he lays out how your ability to produce good in the world is only equal to your ability to produce evil within this world. Now, the good part here is I've just recognized that what I've done has taken friends and acquaintances to a really bad place. But I also recognize if I have the ability to cause this much damage, that means I have the equal ability to cause good or to create good. So hopefully now, if I embody this research that I've been doing, and if I take on these principles that I'm starting to understand and believe in, maybe I also have that potential to influence people within my circle for good and to take this road to success and to find ways to better not only their life, but also the lives of those within their circle as well. But it comes as choice because we have the ability to take that responsibility and be like, that was my fault. I am sorry for what I've done and I need to make amends for it. It's also very easy to be caught up in victim mode. When we talk about victim mode, let's look at this like big picture. I want to use the wise words of Eminem. The pain isn't healing. The anger is spilling. Like recreating the feeling of 9/11 when the second plane hit the building.
So a lot of this pain isn't healing. You're escaping if this anger is spilling. Almost like recreating the feeling of 9/11 when the second plane hit the building.
Recreating that feeling. I don't know if you guys remember where you were on 9/11, but I do. I remember it was one of the most intense feelings. I was 12 years old. It was one of the most intense feelings of what is happening in the world right now. And then as a nation, we bonded together as victims of terrorism. This victimization, it sends a rush to our adrenal system. And this rush, it's exciting and it becomes addictive. And now we start to seek out these situations to where we are the victim. And when we become a victim, we have the right to strike back because they did us harm. And similar to 9/11, we're justified to take this revenge to protect ourselves. I know I'm not saying one way or the other whether that was right or wrong. The idea that I know me at 12 years old, that was ingrained in me. And how many of us who as children are now growing up towards some attack happens on us, our first move is like, oh, that wasn't my fault. Now I need to get them back. I need to take revenge, and it's justified because the pain they caused was evil. So we're presented with this opportunity. Do we take that victim role and do we get even, or do we get revenge? Or do we take responsibility and we recognize that this was my fault? There was something that happened here that I need to take responsibility for, and if I don't, it's just going to produce more of the same cycle of destruction and pain for not only myself, but everyone within my circle of influence. And once we make that choice to take on that responsibility, it opens up the potential for great freedom within ourselves. And this is where we can transition now into individuation and having connected and healthy relationships with others. Without having the ability to take responsibility, we're just going to conform into whatever environment we're in. I'll use an example. When I was in the Navy, I stepped in. I came in as this motivated individual, and I was going to do great things, and I got stuck into the shipyards. And for those of you who have not been in the military, it basically just meant I was a janitor every single day, cleaning and painting and doing a bunch of stuff I didn't ever want to do. I didn't sign up for the military to clean and paint. And so there's this real negative shadow that just covered everyone I worked with. And this is when I started drinking heavily for the first time. And this is where I just became very negative and I hated every aspect of what I was doing. It was like the first time in life where I was like, I don't really care if I live or die because this is terrible. So I got sucked into that, and I could have taken more responsibility, and I could have been this hard charger that pushed to excel. But instead I was just sucked into this community. So within individuality and still maintaining healthy relationships, how do we grow and evolve as individuals while still being connected and still being able to be a contributor to whatever community we're in? and building those healthy relationships that are not only going to keep us healthy and happy, but are also going to progress our lives even further. Because while we can do a lot on our own, we can do more when we have the support of others. But it's also important to recognize when relationships or situations are stifling our individuality, because we do have this desire to be creative on our own and to put our best and our most natural self out there. So we do find ourselves in relationships to where you can't be that full version of yourself, or you're within a work environment to where you're not able to speak freely because it's looked down upon. So while it is important to look to maintain and produce healthy relationships, it's also important to recognize when a relationship or a situation is no longer meant for you. And then to be able to cut ties and walk away and understand that what you did, while maybe painful in some ways, is going to benefit you in the long run. And what I think is essential to understand is this environment that I'm in, is it pushing me into the direction of life to where I find meaning and I find purpose? Now, meaning and purpose, like I said, it's so broad. There's so much, like you always hear people talking about, well, what's your purpose? Just strive for your purpose and you'll be happy. What is purpose? What does that mean? Viktor Frankl writes in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, that happiness and success should not be pursued, but instead it should be a byproduct of a life serves something greater than oneself. Viktor Frankl, he was a clinical psychologist who spent several years as a prisoner in German concentration camps. And during his time as a prisoner, he understood that his experiences, those experiences was what created the real meaning and purpose in his life. That is like the epitome of balancing tragedy and opportunity. Now, when I first recognized that my life was just selfish was when Josh died. Of all my friends, Josh was the guy that lived life the right way. He did things for the right reason, and he wasn't going to waver from his morals just to fit in with the crowd. And when he died, I recognized in myself that everything I was doing was selfish. It was all shallow. There was like no real sense of living for something greater than myself. This is the period in life when I first begin to truly deeply reflect. And I take a trip to Peru. And on this trip, I'm alone. And I'm discovering the unknown, not only within myself, but within this unknown and foreign land. And I do an ayahuasca journey. And in that journey, the medicine, not only does it teach me things in the moment, but the transformation has continued to unfold 3 years later. And this transformation has by no means been miraculous. I still fell into and had to overcome a drug addiction. I've still failed in every relationship I've been in. Diving into traumas to understand why I go through these repeating cycles of self-destruction and self-sabotage, and why I'm so critical on myself every single day. But I think that the healthy aspect that you pull from that is that with these tragedies comes opportunity. And in that transition, there comes evolution. And it is within that process that we can find some meaning and purpose. And many people find that within their religions, or within their family, or within their work. Whatever it is, hopefully whatever you're living for, it's more than just for yourself. And this is where we transition to what I believe is one of the most interesting aspects of existentialism. Anxiety as a condition of living. We hear about anxiety as a mental disorder, and a mental disorder, and a mental disorder. But what anxiety is, it's our body telling us that something needs to be done. I remember probably one of the most anxious times in life was when I was getting ready to move from Virginia to California, and all I had was a house lined up. I knew where I was going to live. I didn't know when I was going to start school. I didn't know what job I was going to do, and I'd been applying to jobs, and it wasn't until I was driving across country that I set up an interview. And I had one interview set up, but what I knew was that I was going to find a way to make it work. I didn't know how, but it was going to work. And this was a point where that anxiety within me, it pushed me to take a chance, and it pushed me. I knew I had to find a way to survive and excel. And this anxiety showed me that I didn't have everything figured out. But on that drive, I had the most freeing feeling that I've ever had. Because when you embrace that anxiety and you decide that you're gonna take it head on, you open yourself up to some of the most incredible experiences that you'll ever live. And for those of you who may be struggling with anxiety daily, It's not an easy thing, but what I would say is use it as a sign that something in your life is not right, and use it as a stimulant for growth rather than being a hindrance that holds you back in life. Now we move into our final element, death and non-being. Now, if death doesn't provide you with enough anxiety for a lifetime, I don't know what will, because that is one of the most intense understandings that we can wrap our head around. We will die. It's funny because when I ask my friends what their greatest fear is, it's normally not death, it's normally failure. But failure is just a part of life. I failed in all my relationships. I failed in some way or another in all my businesses. I fail myself. I don't live up to the standards that I set for myself almost every day. But what I do is I learn and I adapt and I evolve from those failures. And I do this because I know I'm gonna hit this point. It could be tomorrow. It could be in a week. It could be in 20 years. It could be in 60 years. I don't know. But I'm gonna die. I have this weird thing. Every time I get on an airplane, I imagine it crashing and burning. Every time I'm on there, I'm like, well, this might be it. Here I'm gonna die. And now my only hope is that if that plane starts to go down, and I know I don't like roller coasters, so that idea of falling, it's gonna create absolute chaos in me. But I hope that in that moment, I can take a breath. Maybe I can just put some music on, and I can just breathe deep and know that I have done everything possible to live my best life up to that point. And that's not to say that I've lived the perfect life, because I made one mistake after another. But I want to know that I left no stone unturned. That I did what I could to not only make the biggest impact in my own life, but hopefully the lives of those around me as well. I'd like to finish with a quote out of the book, The Untethered Soul. Death actually gives life meaning. Death is your friend. Death is your liberator. Guys, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this video. If you have any thoughts, please comment below. If you'd like to hear more details on any of these topics specifically, let me know. I know I just did a brief overview, but it's too much to go in depth into in one video. So if you'd like to know more on any of those, let me know. If you feel like this video would serve someone else, please share. Thank you. Have a blessed week.